If I had the sermon title, which isn't printed, I hadn't realized what the sermon title was. The sermon title is Lazarus Matters. It's along the same lines as Black Lives Matter. Of course, all lives matter. But Lazarus, the one who has no name to the rich man, that the rich man didn't recognize, but God does. Lazarus Matters. We we have been I've been preaching through we've had these passages from Luke, and it's about the, the passages from Luke. We've heard about the lost coin. We learned about, well, there's also the prodigal son. There is the prodigal shepherd who leaves his 99 to go search the one that is lost. Prodigal means to be wasteful, extravagant, improvident, imprudent. So the shepherd is wasteful in risking the 99. The woman with the coin is wasteful. She finds the coin that was lost, and then apparently goes and spends a good part of it to have a big party with her friends because she's so grateful for having found it. And this one, the prodigalness of God's love and forgiveness. The passage is about this story of the rich man and Lazarus. You know that the topic that is addressed most frequently in all of scriptures has to do with poverty and the poor, and that it has also to do with relationships and reversals. That's when in our prayer we said, God of reversals. That Lazarus, unlike our parable last Sunday, where it was difficult of the dishonest steward, it was hard to figure out. It was confusing. Who are you in this? Who do you relate to? Are you the steward? Are you the debtor? This one is much more clear. And I'll tell you, it is preached in poor churches a lot more often than it's preached in rich churches. The characters are the rich man who doesn't have a name, Lazarus, who was poor, destitutely poor, and he has a name. He is named. And there's Father Abraham. Those are the characters if we were putting this together as a drama. The rich man is introduced as wearing purple and fine linen. And I found out something very good. Purple is the color of royalty. It was made in Phoenicia. Dorcas in the New Testament was a dealer in purple cloth. But the fine linen is like very, very good Egyptian cotton. It is the underclothes that are worn underneath the toga, the kind of gown that men would wear. It's very, very fancy underwear. The rich man was so rich, he had everything of the highest quality, more than he could possibly have needed. Now, this story is set. There's talk about being taken in the afterlife to be with Father Abraham. I guess we would say that heaven, or be in torment, which is the rich man, you'd say in hell. But it's not really so much about the afterlife. It's about the relationships in the present life, the relationship in the present life. For how do we view the other? how does the rich man view Lazarus, who is so poor that he like lies covered with sores at the gate of the rich man's fancy house? The rich man doesn't see him, doesn't pay a bit of attention to him. Even the dogs. What I read was that it's not so much that the dogs were being terrible to them, and at least they were attending to him. But the rich man did nothing. But when the rich man does see Lazarus, he sees him from Hades. He calls out to Father Abraham, not to say, oh, oh, poor Lazarus, or it's good that his fortunes have changed. It's for him to send. He calls out for Father Abraham to send him Lazarus as a servant, the rich man. It says that there is a great chasm, Father Abraham says, between us and you. But the chasm is of the rich man's own making. The chasm, the separation, the condition of sin in which the rich man lives is of his very own making. This story is about the dehumanization of people who are poor. And that is something that has happened since time immemorial. And perhaps, and the other part is that there is an invitation in this parable. It's almost like a fable to transformation, that this divide between the rich and the poor is crossable, and that the divide is of our own making. Lazarus does see Father Abraham. But what he doesn't recognize is that in seeing Father Abraham caring for Lazarus means that Abraham is the rich man's father. He's also Lazarus's father, which means that they are brothers. But the rich man can see God's fatherhood, but he cannot see that Lazarus is his brother. He can't do it. And then he says, well, if I'm stuck here, he tells Father Abraham to go send someone to his 5 brothers, because they really ought to figure this out. They ought to be corrected so that they don't suffer like he does. And Father Abraham, I think rather kindly, says, you must be kidding. You already know this. You have the law. You have the prophets. You have the Shema. You have Isaiah saying, you shall beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks. If you ever needed evidence in scriptures that Christianity is an extension of Judaism, you find it here. Everything, all of the love, you're loving your neighbor as yourself, all that is in the Hebrew scriptures. You already have it. And besides, Abraham says, even somebody, Jesus has risen from the dead to remind us of this. But even somebody rising from the dead will not convince them as well. They've got to do it too. Too many of us do not see Lazarus. Lazarus is still here. There are whole people, Gustavo Gutierrez. I'm going to be taking a course with he was my first theology professor. And he talks about how there is in the modern world this category of a complete non-person. Whole groups, whole practically nations of people are just ignored by the world community, and they don't matter. And that is of our own making. Some in 2001, 21 years ago, this was the Sunday, this was the text for the Sunday when I went to preach at McAllister Plymouth Church in St. Paul as the new pastor. It was the first sermon I preached as the pastor. And it was September of 2011, just a couple weeks after 9/11. And we didn't know very much about who had done the attacks of 9/11. But in this passage, I saw that the terrorism in the international community, that there were young people and disenfranchised people and angry people that are so poor and so hopeless that we haven't even seen. This modern non-person, there are so many more people. We live in very segregated communities, so that we don't often see the poor people who are destitute. They're people first. And we tolerate this. Christianity teaches, Judaism and Christianity and Islam altogether teach us that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And as Luke will tell us in the parable of the Good Samaritan, our neighbor is not just the guy who lives next door. It is anyone who is in need. Christianity teaches this and tells us to see the non-person. For as we are all the children of the same God, we are brothers and sisters. Christianity has been tried, somebody said, and it has been found, has not been lacking. It's not that Christianity has been tried and found to be lacking. It is Christianity has been tried and found to be too hard, too difficult. And so, my friends, in our personal lives, in our families, in our church, community, nation, and in the world through agencies of international relief and through our politics, let us eliminate the chasm that exists, for it is our responsibility to do so. Amen.